This is America's Mayor Live. Today was a day in which we saw the House Democrats once again stick to their script, their lie, their frame up of Russian collusion, attacking Durham viciously for being unethical, for not finding anything that Mueller didn't find, for wasting the money of the taxpayers in investigating this, and all sorts of other things. Most of it coming from the liar in chief, Shifty Schiff, and from I don't know what you would call Nadler, but whatever I said would be considered insensitive and indecent. But you take a good look at him, and it's hard not to say something.
Mayor, I would call him Humpty Dumpty. I'll say that for you.
Humpty Dumpty?
Yes, sir.
Right. Well, whatever he is, he's another big liar. And but nobody exceeds Schiff, which today resulted in his being censored. The Republicans that had voted not to censor him changed their vote because Congressman Anna Paulina removed the $16 million fine. The reason the Republicans had voted against that is not that they agreed in any way with him or thought that his conduct was justified, but they thought Congress really didn't have the power to impose a fine on members. Consider the fact that one day they might get censored, and they probably don't want to have to pay a $10 million fine. And if we do it to them, they'll do it to us. So I'm not so sure that wasn't such a bad decision on the part of those Republicans in not introducing the idea of fines. Democrats get control of the House, they'll probably try to fine every Republican out of the House. They are almost now, it's almost impossible to predict how far their lying and their corruption will take them. Any place where they can stay in power forever. I do not believe the Democrat Party is any longer a party that shares with us, Republicans and non-aligned people, complete commitment to a democracy and to a rule of law. I think their goal is to be in power forever, to exercise powers that are more akin to a fascist government, such as the indictment of Trump on charges that they largely made up and for which they haven't indicted Democrats that did far worse. That's one of the biggest signs of a fascist state, using the criminal justice system, which should be carefully separated from politics precisely for political purposes. Today, Newsmax published a poll that is pretty consistent with other polls that I've seen, which is that 62% of the American people, Republican and Democrat and independent, believe that the prosecution of Trump by the crooked Biden Justice Department is politically motivated. I'm surprised it's only 62%. I wonder who the dopes are that don't realize it. If you can't figure out that that's politically motivated, you probably went to a public school dominated by the teachers union because you didn't get much of an education. You learned communist propaganda. You learned Black Lives Matter propaganda. You learned nothing. Unfortunately, the condition of our public education, I can speak best for the largest school system in the United States. The New York City school system slipped dramatically during the pandemic, since the teachers decided to take twice as much time off as they should, maybe more. Became a big vacation for them, paid vacation for them. Made it yet another indication that the control of our school systems are in the hands of a union that has no concern for the children they're educating. But 62% said it was politically motivated. 51 to 41, however, did conclude that he should be prosecuted, which really concerns me because it's really not a case. It's really not a case. It's a created case by the crooked Biden administration and by the press. It's a dispute over documents under a law that's essentially a civil law, the Presidential Records Act. And therefore, I'm kind of surprised that the American people don't see that, although, the coverage is so biased and so unfair. I don't know how they drew the conclusion that it was politically motivated. I mean, if you just watched, let's just pick one of them, ABC News, you wouldn't get that impression. Let's say you watched ABC News and you read the New York Times and the Washington Post. I don't know how you would come to that conclusion. In fact, you would not find out today or tomorrow that Greta Thunberg, you know who Greta Thunberg is, right? Here's I'll show you a picture of Greta. This looks like she might be a little bit of a while back, but Greta had actually predicted some years ago that we were all going to die by this date, if we didn't stop using fossil fuels. Well, I mean, Greta, can you see that, Ted?
Yeah, keep it on there.
To Greta's dismay, we made it through the day, and we have not given up fossil fuels. In fact, the reduction in fossil fuels is far less than the maniacal climate cultist would like us to do. And Greta, of course, just keeps making predictions. She's like the like the weathermen. They predict rain, it's sunny, then nobody keeps. They should be like baseball players. What's their batting average? I mean, did they predict it correctly 1 out of 2 times, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4? She hasn't been right yet. I mean, we've been gone, by my calculation, this is at least the 3rd time that we pass a deadline for our complete demise based on poor little Greta.
Right. Didn't Al Gore also run on this climate change as well?
Al Gore had the one really specific one that he did. He stopped doing it because he knew he was going to get caught. But by 2010, the southern part of America would basically be gone. It'd be flooded. But like Florida, I don't know, but I think I was in Florida a few weeks ago. It didn't look flooded to me. And I did see Al Gore, and he did look spacey to me. So you want to get kind of an idea who is coming in to the United States with the 6 million that have come in under Biden, and they come in without any even interruption by United States Border Patrol or any United States authority. The only interruption for their journey to the United States are the Mexican cartels, which are on the other side of the border and act as really a toll booth for their coming in and try to exact from them what they can get out of it, because this is a wonderful process for them to take advantage of, which they do. And they do it for themselves and on behalf of terrorist groups like ISIS, and significantly on behalf of the Red Chinese, particularly with the fentanyl traffic. But I'm sure you remember that the nature of the illegal immigrant has changed quite a bit. And we're not looking at overwhelming numbers of people from Mexico, which is what we were looking at 20 years ago. We're looking at people from all over the world that are coming in. In a lot of these groups, you'll see people from Asia, people from China. Who's to say that some of them aren't spies? If you were a Chinese communist, dead set against the United States, wanting to surpass the United States by 2048 at the latest, you would take advantage of this uncontrolled border and slip your people in. You're already doing business with the cartels with fentanyl on a daily basis and both of you making hundreds of millions, if not billions on that. So doing business on getting a couple of spies in. And of course, as we know, finding those police stations that China has all over the United States, they have no compunction about spying in our country. or even operating a kind of police force in our country. And Biden knew about it for quite some time, but I think they told him and he fell asleep and forgot. And they're being cleaned out, but very, very slowly. I think Biden is afraid of making waves with Z. He doesn't confront China or anything. You saw the pathetic performance of Blinken with Mr. Z. I thought he was going to, kneel down. He got pretty low, like way down. I thought he was going to actually kneel down to Mr. Z. Maybe he's trying to see if he can get the kind of money that Biden gets. So in the city of Tegucigalpa, right? Tegucigalpa, which is the capital city of Honduras. Hold on. Yeah, the capital city of Honduras. There was a massive riot. And the reason it's of significance is it involved two gangs, both of which have significant representation in the United States, Barrio 18 and MS 13. I'm sure you've heard of MS 13. You've probably heard less about Barrio 18. This was in a prison, and it ended up with 46 inmates being killed. Now that is to kill 46 inmates within a prison would have to mean they had total control of the prison, right? I mean, we've had prison murders and prison riots in the United States. I mean, this is massive number of people. And both Barrio 18 and MS 13 are street gangs, but they're street gangs, particularly MS 13. MS 13 you'd really also have to describe as a kind of organized crime group as well, with big representation in California and big representation on Long Island. This is the group that, I think this is the group that Trump, when he originally announced, described as animals. Largely because their introduction to Long Island and Islip, I think, was to cut the head of a girl off and put her on a beach just as their signature, which is what they do when they come into a new area. They commit a horrific crime to get your attention. And of course, the left wing, which basically took up for MS-13 against Trump, castigated Trump for calling them animals. Even though they chop the bodies of human beings up into pieces. But this gives you an idea that there's no doubt that MS-13 people come in on a regular basis. There's no reason why they can't. They're not stopped. They're not stopped at the border. Once they get here, they make a claim for asylum, which they are taught to say. And then we put them in a situation where we schedule them for a hearing, and the hearing is 5 years from now. So now we have that MS-13 member here. And there is no question, I can't tell you the numbers, but they are very well represented within the group that comes across various parts of the, particularly Mexico-Texas border, and contribute a lot of money to the cartel so that they get primary positions. And also, one of the things the cartels can do for you almost with about 80% accuracy is they can get you over completely undetected. So the calculation of the number of people that come over without being detected at all has varied based on studies done by MIT, Harvard, and other places, from 50% to 150%. So let's use an example. Let's say 1 million people come over, or 2 million. The number now per year is more like, let's use the right number, 2.2, 2.3 million a year. Used to be way less than 1 million. But Biden has created maybe the biggest invasion in the history of the world, 6-7 million. So if 2 million come in this year, accounted for in some way, I mean, don't think they're vetted. They're not. Their name is written down. And beyond that, we don't know much else about them. Maybe some we do. But then, even worse than that, anywhere from another million to 2.5 million come in and nobody sees them. They come over unpatrolled portions of the border. Most experts will tell you that the more people that come over by the regular routes and are detected and accounted for and then allowed to come in, well, the more people that come in undetected because our resources are strained and there are many more openings along the border to get them in. The Mexican cartels know exactly where those weak points on the border are because they know the border better than we do. So they will know at any given time that if instead of coming across at El Paso, if we move over about 30 miles and come over there, the chance that there'll be any kind of border patrol there is nil, and nil to the extent that the numbers get to match the numbers that are coming in legally. So if you want that expert advice from them, you pay them. And of course, a group like MS-13 and Barrio 18 and the other organized crime groups that are having a field day sending people into the United States, pay them for that service. And so this is not, this isn't, Pancho and his gang. These people are highly sophisticated, organized criminals. They are certainly the equal of the Colombian cartels of the 70s and 80s, 90s. They are in certain ways as shrewd and as well organized as the mafia. The only thing different between them and the mafia is they don't have the political infiltration and business infiltration that the mafia has. But if they keep working with the Democrat Party, they may end up having that also. I mean, of course, some people get kind of emotional about this, and they accuse Biden of deliberately working with them, and I don't think Biden is doing that. But Biden's policies are as if he's deliberately working with them. They've got exactly what they need. They've got unrestricted access to the United States. If they're willing to get identified, just identified, then they'll be put on a list, and they'll get bail or the equivalent of bail, and they'll get a court date to come back 5 to 7 years from now. So now they get lost in the United States, and we never find them. That's one way to come in that gets you in illegally, making a mockery of our asylum laws. The people who do come to trial, and those are the people that come back, so they have the best cases. It's only about 5 to 10% that end up actually being entitled to asylum. But you can imagine that whole group that doesn't come back, they have no real claim of asylum. It's just a big joke. But again, before I leave the subject, I want you to remember, that's the number we hear all the time. There's a number that's at least half that to 1.5 times that of people we never get to see. And of course, it is quite logical with the cartels controlling that, because they get to see them. They're going to be the worst ones, right? They'll be the worst ones. They'll be the MS-13 and Barrio 18 that are capable of killing 46 people in a prison. This reminds me, and sometime I'll tell you the significant facts about the Mariel boat lift that Castro pulled off on Carter, because I got the job of cleaning it up. And I'll tell you how I cleaned it up. The Mariel boat lift occurred in 79 when Jimmy Carter challenged Castro. He was having some kind of a, spitting contest with Castro. They were saying Carter wanted to appear strong and resolute and tough, which, I mean, compared to Biden, he was. And he was also, mentally competent, which is a heck of a big distinction. I often think that Jimmy Carter Well, he probably, I mean, it's not fair. I like Jimmy, actually. I just don't think he was a good president.
You ever meet Jimmy Carter?
I did. I know him fairly well. Yeah. He tried to help me when I was running for president, when I was thinking of running for president, because he wanted to defeat Hillary.
Outside of his job performance as president and outside of partisan politics, what was he like? You've talked a lot about how Joe Biden has been like.
What was he?
What was Jimmy Carter like?
Jimmy was a nice man, an understated man, not like he wasn't a guy with a lot of charisma like a Clinton or a Trump or that, when you think of a major politician. You would not think if you met him that he would be elected president. He didn't have that outgoing kind of personality. And he did get elected in a strange way. He got elected after Watergate, with Ford being rejected. A lot of people believe because of the pardon of Nixon, and a lot of people believe because of Saturday Night Live, and the way in which they mocked him for his alleged clumsiness. Strangest thing about it is, could be, if you look carefully, that Ford was the most accomplished athlete we ever had in the presidency. He was a
University of Michigan.
He was a All-American football player.
University of Michigan, go blue.
And he was a very he was a decorated. He fought in the Second World War. I mean, but he had a couple of falls. Remind you of somebody? He had a couple of falls, not anywhere near as dramatic as Dopey, and then he didn't forget sentences and think he talked to dead people and not know where he was. Like when he went to Cambodia, he thought he was in Colombia. That was a good one. Just on the other side of the world. He thinks he gave his uncle the Purple Heart in the White House when he was vice president. Distinctly remembers it, goes through the whole ceremony. Problem is his uncle, well, two problems. His uncle was dead for 7 years before he was elected vice president. So it would have been tough to do it. It might have been a posthumous ceremony, except his uncle never got the award. Now, this, of course, is lifelong Biden. The man has been a miserable, disgusting liar from the moment he became a public figure. One lie after another. I have 5 degrees. He has 2. I was in the top half of my class. He was 4th from the bottom of his class. I have a very high IQ. He was left back in the 3rd grade.
He had to drop out of the presidential race in 1988 for lying.
For being a major liar. And he was declared finished by Sam Donaldson. Sam Donaldson did a piece on him saying, well, this guy will never be able to come back.
Mayor, did you actually ever meet Joe Biden?
Many times.
Many times. And was he always very like dopey and clumsy and stuff?
I long before this all happened, I would describe him. People thought I did it as a joke, but maybe a little bit. I would say he's the dumbest person I ever met.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not talking about politicians. He's clearly the dumbest politician I ever met. I mean, all the people I met.
We know some dumb people, so that's
think of all the mafia guys and the criminals I put away. A lot of them weren't all that dopey.
So you're saying Biden has far surpassed Jimmy Carter as the worst president in U.S. history?
They're not even on the same.
Not even in the galaxy.
Yeah.
Wow. You wouldn't put Jimmy. I don't think you'd put Jimmy Carter as a.
No, not the mayor, but people say Jimmy Carter was the worst. Most people say Jimmy Carter was one of the worst.
I would say of our era. It's hard to go back before, let's say.
We had some doozies in the 18.
Those are hard to go
in
back
the early
to.
1800s.
It's hard to go back.
I'm just talking about recent times.
It might even be unfair to them. Some of them turned out to have bad reputations. They actually were pretty good presidents.
Yeah.
But
fake news back then.
Yeah. I'm talking about post World War II
of presidents that we know enough about to make a judgment.
Right.
I would say until he came along, Carter was the weakest president and left the country in the worst shape. Because of his actions, as opposed to because of what happened, like a president could leave in the middle of a war or a depression or an economic downturn, and that's not necessarily their fault. But he was the architect of his own problems, whether it was the hostages in Iran, because he didn't do anything to bolster up the Shah. He just let the crazy maniac Muslims take over. He major setbacks against the Russians. He withdrew the decision to put intermediate range ballistic missiles in Europe, which had that remained, the Soviet Union would have remained. It was Reagan's decision to redeploy them that scared the living daylights out of the Russians. He had us in double-digit inflation, which then became known as stagflation. I think we were like Biden went up to as high as 8%, which was, but he was up to like 13%. Unemployment was massive. And then he was a downer. I mean, he went and gave a speech. He went and gave a speech and basically said, we have no hope. And we just have to get used to the fact that we're going to be a poor country now. That was sort of it. But he didn't, but he wasn't, that was his personality. And that was, to some extent, the useless Democrats around him. It wasn't as directed as this is toward destroying our form of government. I think Jimmy Carter was a patriotic president who loved America. I mean, the first president that I encountered that I did not believe loved America was Obama, because he spent all that time going around criticizing America. And his wife, I thought, was very open when she said the first and only good thing that happened to America was the election of a president. An exaggeration, I'm sure, but it still gives you an indication of they don't think much of our wonderful country.
And Mayor, how you say that with honest Abe Lincoln over your left shoulder? What a sad state of affairs, where even today there are people out there who just look at America and just see its faults and refuse to acknowledge the progress we've made and the way we've led the world.
Yeah, I mean, there was
human progress.
Yes. I mean, it's really I mean, I guess you can always look at things in two different ways, but you look at this recent holiday of Juneteenth, in which you could say it was a reflection of the horrible things that America did with slavery, or was it a reflection of the unbelievably heroic things America did to bring about emancipation, which included fighting a war and losing the largest number of troops in any of the wars that it fought. So even as compared to fighting in the First World War and the Second World War, we lost a lot more troops. And half the people died with help from Black people, as we know from some of the movies and histories, et cetera. But the vast majority, 95% of the men who died to free the Black people were white people, terrible white people. Are in the graves in Gettysburg and elsewhere, having fought to free slaves. I mean, something? Sure it does. Not to these America haters, who now are not just America haters. If you listen to my show and you listen to my podcast, you'll know that I have done many to try to show you the connections between what is happening, because this is a directed effort to destroy our form of government, to create one world, to get rid of nationalities. You can go back and read Marx, and you can read Engels, and you can read Saul Alinsky, or you can read George Soros. That's what people say. What does George Soros want? He wants an extinction of American nationalism and a one world, with I guess the chief advisors being him and Klaus Schwab and Gates and King Obama.
Mayor, when did the modern Democrat Party make this shift? And maybe you could say over 100 years ago, communists had a influence in American politics, but it's kind of been, considered stay away from that for a long time. But recently, it seems as though maybe using different language, today's Democrat Party is increasingly influenced by communists.
Yeah, I think the influence of communism has gotten greater and greater. Mm-hmm. Almost from the beginning, they had a piece of the Democrat Party. but they were easily kept down and beaten down. They had way too much influence in the Roosevelt and Truman administrations. And that for a long time was controlled, not extinguished, but controlled. The numbers decreased. They had to go somewhat underground because they were discovered. They made a shift. They made a shift in their strategy. The shift they made in their strategy was Marx saw communism as emerging from the class struggle between the rich and the workers. The bourgeoisie would be the rich and the proletariat. They used that model, starting with the Soviet Revolution in the early part of the 20th century. They even used that model in the Chinese Revolution, and it really didn't work in the West. They made very little progress as a popular party in America. They made some progress in Europe, like particularly in Italy. They had a fairly strong political party, but still they never could win because we just don't really have those kinds of class divisions, particularly in America. We're a very, very mobile society. In one generation, you can go from rich to poor or from poor to being a billionaire. And even though there are sort of little vestiges of it, like these silly private clubs and that sort of thing, America is very much based on money. I mean, you can become a really powerful guy and your father was, on welfare. Or you could be the son of a very powerful guy and you lost all the money because you're a big dope and you're nobody, except maybe for a few silly people that don't mean anything. So the class warfare didn't fit the American model. But then they found what they were going to use, race, and exploited that. And it's really their influence that has deprived us of the benefits that we should have gotten from all of the heroic work done about race in America, going back to the Civil War, where a war was fought to end slavery. And then, we had some setbacks, but then we had the civil rights movement that, yes, was led by Martin Luther King Jr. and blacks, but also had the participation of many, many white people. And of course, the Civil Rights Bill was passed by white people, particularly Republicans who were needed because the Democrats couldn't get the votes because they had within their party virulent racists, members of the Ku Klux Klan, because they didn't want to give up the South. The Republican Party didn't have that. Republican Party was anti-Klan from the very beginning. It was one of their, they were an anti-slavery, anti-Klan party. And one of the early members, as you, I'm sure all know, is the great president right behind me, Abraham Lincoln. And I always like to point out New York is such a screwed up city, such a ridiculously Pavlovian Democrat city. They voted against Abraham Lincoln twice. But I mean, what do you? I mean, maybe they're just too far gone for any hope. Imagine voting against Abraham Lincoln.
I mean,
you got to really look. You got to really look dopey, right?
I'm in a room full of New Yorkers, but you actually taught me this. New York voted against.
New York City.
New York City. Sorry, yes.
New York State.
Not New York State.
New York State until about.
What are we fighting this war for? They thought it was a waste of time and money and resources.
New York State voted for Ronald Reagan twice. I mean, people are shocked by that, but it voted for Ronald Reagan twice, and so did California, and in his first race in 1980, one of the biggest counties in the country for him was Nassau County in New York, which is right next to New York City. The county to our east was he got, I think, possibly his biggest or second biggest margin of victory. It was those suburban counties surrounding New York were Republican strongholds. That's the change that occurred. The city was always Democratic, going back to Lincoln, but the suburbs were very strongly Republican, and that switched with Bush and Clinton. and hasn't gone back but a little bit. In the last 2 elections, gains were made in the suburbs, which is why, for example, New York had a net 4 additional Republican congressmen this year. So there are indications that the suburbs are beginning to shift, not like that, but and not becoming the strongholds they were before, but becoming places that are plurality or majority Republican. And that could be a very, very big shift in everything that's going on. And one of the reasons why Democrats are bringing in so many illegals, because things are not, I mean, you sort of look at the young people and they're very, they sound like they're communists and they sound like that. You can't count on that. That changes. The Democrat Party exists because it has a built-in vote that it controls and keeps dependent, because their policies are ridiculous and their performance even worse. I want you to give me the name of a Democrat mayor who was a good manager. You're not going to be able to give me one because they're all a bunch of silly liberals who have a very, very unrealistic, childish ideas, and they don't work. Like Biden, right? Let's just spend more money. Let's just spend more money. Or like Adams, who talks to God, except he doesn't know what to do about the 70 to 80,000 illegals he invited here. He somehow forgot that he invited them here. This is what Democrats do. They do stupid things like that, or they set up welfare programs which don't get people out of poverty, because the only thing that gets people out of poverty is work. They don't attach workfare to it. Clinton attached workfare because Newt Gingrich forced him to do it. I did workfare 2 years before Clinton even thought of it in New York City, where it probably was the hardest place in the world to do it because we had 1.2 million people. And they did it based on my model and Tommy Thompson, not Bill Clinton. But of course, I'll never get credit for it, nor will Tommy, because we're Republicans. But before they even knew about welfare, we would workfare, we were doing it. Because I am a good manager, and I'm a practical manager. And I know that I'm not getting you out of poverty by giving you a welfare check. I might get you past the week or the month or the year, but I'm not getting you out of poverty. And if I keep you there into a second and third generation, we just blew the work ethic.
Mayor, what's your opinion? Democrats always say this. They say back in the days of the 60s, 50s, 40s, the Republicans were really Democrats and Democrats were really Republicans. What do you think of this nonsense that they speak of? And then the parties have changed back then.
Well, of course, there was the shift in the South, right, with the Democrat Party.
The parties have changed in that they're much more. Allied with the moderate Democrats, because Dewey was really his mentor. So we had a division in the Republican. We had Republican senators like Jacob Javits and a whole group of others that could, Senator Percy in Illinois, and who could be regarded as, I guess now you'd call them rhinos. But that split in the Republican Party was there. Certainly during the 30s and 40s and 50s, there was also a split in the Democrat Party. Democrat Party, a couple of ways. First of all, the Democrat Party was split on foreign policy. There was always a very a nationalistic, patriotic wing of the Democrat Party that was indistinguishable from the Republican Party in terms of support for the military and opposition to communism. But the Democratic Party always had a wing, like the Republicans had a wing, that was very sympathetic toward the Soviet Union, very sympathetic toward communism, and also infiltrated by the communists. Roosevelt, at the end of his administration, had significant infiltration by communists, which can be one of the reasons for all the mistakes made at Yalta, giving Stalin so much power, not invading China when China was on the balls of its you-know-what, and MacArthur was stopped from beating them back away from Korea. We didn't have to have a North and South Korea. The Democrats, I mean, Truman gave us a North and South Korea, despite the fact that he gets largely now glorified as a great president. He did do some good things. He also did some horrendous things. And the Korean War is probably, Korean War also got us into the limited war, where we don't win, we don't lose, we just lose a lot of lives. And we end up, with a stalemate at the end. Whereas MacArthur wanted to fight it to a conclusion. Basically, what he wanted to do was, before he took command of our armies, we were basically defeated in Korea. The American army, the Allied armies, the United Nation army, and the South Korean army was driven to the very south of South Korea. And North Korea basically controlled most of Korea. Finally, Roosevelt put MacArthur in charge. They were always afraid to do it because they knew he was very opinionated and didn't like them, because he saw them as influenced by communists. And he did the Incheon landings, which is probably one of the greatest military strategies in the history of the United States. He skipped all of Korea, and he took his army, and by amphibious landing, which we now were expert at because of D-Day and because of the fighting that MacArthur oversaw in the Pacific, he took his army. He didn't march up Korea. He sailed around Korea, and he left the North Korean army behind him as he took the northern part of Korea away from them. He got so far into the northern part of Korea that he got right next to China, right against their border, right up against their border. And all of a sudden, as we're basically taking control of Korea, thousands and thousands of troops come over the border from China, and they're Chinese. The Chinese entered the war and started killing us. MacArthur was prohibited from sending his air force over the border to bomb them, because they would go back at night. So the Chinese army had come in, they'd do an incursion for 3 or 4 days, and then they go retreat back over their border and rearm. And MacArthur wanted the permission to take our military, take our air force, and bomb the living daylights out of them. They had no air force. They had no atomic bomb. They had just fought a almost 15-year war against Chiang Kai-shek, and therefore were decimated. And I think we would have beaten them with 10% of our army. And MacArthur knew that. So did the communists around Truman.
So they didn't let him go. They didn't let him attack China.
They held then MacArthur got fired because he went and did it anyway. And MacArthur said, "Screw you! I'm not going to sit here and have my men killed and have these people go. I'm going to go chase them to wherever the hell they go, and I'll chase them to the ends of the earth to kill them if they're going to come and kill my men." And he reversed the war again, and then they fired him, and then we had to accept a compromise.
So the current setup where North Korea exists,
Yeah,
some try to claim, that's almost a necessity. That's not a necessity. That so-called buffer between
MacArthur
and
occupied
communism.
North Korea with the United States Army. With the he actually was in charge of the UN army. It was fought under the auspices of the UN. MacArthur actually occupied it, like he occupied Japan. He occupied it. and because they took them out, and because they wouldn't contest China, we made a deal and gave them the northern part, southern part. And just think of all of the people in North Korea who we have destroyed as a result of that and made them into automatons. And I mean, North Korea is, I don't know if it's the worst dictatorship in the world, but it's pretty close to it. I mean, they're completely brainwashed. They're devoid of information. It's very, very hard to get communications into North Korea.
It's quite sick how South Korea is flourishing and the economy is well. Everyone is, healthy and eats well. And then North Korea, it's a disaster.
Mike, the thing that's very strange about this is our young people, and this is why they're not taught true history. This was the same thing with East Berlin,
right, and the wall.
And West Berlin.
That's right, Mayor.
Here are the points that used to be made about that. Nobody ever escaped West Berlin and went across the bridge into East Berlin. Nobody went from freedom to communism. Nobody. There's not a single example of anybody being shot going the other way. In fact, if you want to go the other way, you could go. They didn't stop you. You wanted to go into a communist country. You were stupid enough to go into a communist country. Go see a psychiatrist, pal. Meanwhile, the ones coming over the other way, I mean, they would shoot 3 or 4 a week. You couldn't. You were locked into East Berlin. You didn't have to be locked into West Berlin. West Berlin had a standard of living that I don't know if it was as good as the United States, but it was comparable. East Berlin was like something closer to a third world country, starving. They had food lines, and yeah, I mean, there was a showcase right there where you could see capitalism, communism. And every communist country except China has fallen apart. Every communist country has completely fallen apart. Russia is not a communist country any longer, but it's not a communist country. In fact, it's what the hell are those oligarchs if they're not capitalists, right? And and China really isn't a communist country any longer, except by philosophy. It uses the dictatorial part of communism, not the sharing of wealth, because the 100 million people in the Communist Party are all multimillionaires, and everybody else is struggling or in third world poverty. So, we have any calls and
well, Mayor, we're going to actually take a break right now,
and some questions.
Yeah, we're going
to listen to Kirk, and I want you to pay attention to this, and I want you to make that call. Because I want you to get the information and the knowledge that will give you and apply it to your own personal life, and then do what you want. I'm not selling you. I mean, I think you should go with them because I think they're good. But the main thing is to understand how you have to diversify if you want to get through the next 2 years safely.
And then, of course, when we get back, give us a call at 646-573-5177. That's 646-573-5177.
Faith and family, freedom and finance are 4 things that we would do anything to protect. I trust the team at Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors, with providing the advice and sound strategies to take advantage of the inflationary pressures, the high interest rates, and the international challenges we face today. The Kirk Elliott team, with over 29 years of experience, shares our values and believes in people over profit. They can help you protect your finances from the big government policies that are out of our control. So what's in our control? The decision to act or not to act is within our control. I encourage you to act. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors today. Start working with a team that will help you protect your retirement assets with gold and silver while sharing your desire to protect your faith, family, and freedom. Call them today, 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900, and tell them Rudy sent you. Or simply fill out a request for a free consultation at kirkelliottphd.com/Rudy. I think you should read their online editions every day, but every Wednesday. Wanted to just point out to you is GoFundMe hosts surgery fundraisers for minors. So if you want to, if you're a minor and you and or your parents want you to chop off your genitals, GoFundMe will allow you to raise money for that. But they do block out many conservative causes. I bet you they wouldn't let you. Suppose I wanted to start an organization that educates people about the dangers of abortion, particularly late term. I bet they wouldn't let me raise money for that. They'll let me raise money so that a 13-year-old can chop his or her or whatever pronoun. We get all confused with pronouns now.
Well, Mayor, we have Allison on the phone. She would like to talk to you about North Korea.
Oh, sure. Allison, how are you?
She's good. Yeah.
Okay. I'm telling you, always give me the second. Always give me the second one. This is not working. I don't know if you people were watching last night, but I pointed out that every time I get earphones, the first one doesn't work. Maybe you have to make it louder.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Now I hear fine now, Allison. How are you?
Well, I'm good, but Mr. Giuliani, I've got to tell you, if you weren't a lawyer, you should have taught history. And this conversation on the Korean War, I mean, I'm enthralled.
Yeah,
And
it's something that people should really study more. I mean, we spent a lot of time studying the Second World War. We kind of ignore, to some extent, the First World War and the Korean War. And the Korean War set the stage from then until 1990, until the Soviet Union fell and the Berlin Wall fell.
We're still at war with them.
Oh yeah, but I'm talking about
the treaty.
I'm talking about the entire. Now, yeah, sure, the problem is still exists in Korea, but it defined the Cold War. And,
Well, you did mention General MacArthur,
right?
And two things I would suggest for your listeners are to read a book called An American Caesar.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous. Great biography,
isn't it?
Yep.
It's fascinating.
Great biography.
And read his farewell speech at West Point.
You get goosebumps if you read it. I also suggest watching the movie MacArthur with Gregory Peck playing MacArthur and giving that speech. It's one of the great acting performances ever.
Yeah, one thing I want to bring up before we run out of time here is Supernotes and fentanyl. And I don't know if people are aware of the connectivity or that they're both an act of war, but a lot of the Chinese fentanyl, we believe it's coming, or at least 10 years ago, we believed it was coming from North Korea. And Supernotes, why don't you explain Supernotes? You'll do a better job than I
go
can.
ahead,
But
go ahead.
Supernotes are an act of, Supernotes are counterfeit $100 bills.
Right.
And
that's part of their war. China, among other things, objective is to replace the dollar as the world currency. So anything they can do to undermine the dollar and a lot of the alternative currencies are seen as possible attacks on the dollar, which China and
Yes.
people like Gates and who are one worlders who want to end an American nation support. But
Well-
fentanyl is fentanyl's like an extension of COVID. I mean, they sent around hundreds of thousands or thousands of Chinese to infect us and kill us, and now they're sending around the chemicals that kill us. So
Well, they have no respect for life. They don't even care about their own people.
no,
you know,
actually, one of the
people-
dumbest statements that Fauci made is, "Well, of course I trusted the Chinese scientists. They wouldn't kill their own people.
Oh, please.
They've killed
But,
80. The little weasel somehow doesn't know that they've killed 80 million of their own people." Well, thank you, Allison.
Oh,
we got to go to Joe. Is that it?
Mayor, you are on now with Robin Seacaucus.
Oh, okay. How are you?
Hello, Mayor. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Rob?
Good, good. It seems like you can hear me good. That's good.
Yep.
I was thinking, there's that young lady. You probably have seen her before. Her name is Yeonmi Park from North Korea. She defected from North Korea.
Yes, of course. I have. Very impressive.
What an impressive individual she is. Would it be something? Is it? You think it's possible to get her on the show? Because wow.
Yeah, let's work on it. Let's work on it.
I'll try to reach out if I can.
And I'll see if I can get the number too, so that we can. I think I did have a contact with her at one point. Let me see if we can get her. She would be really she'd be really terrific. Absolutely terrific.
There's something about the way she speaks. She's very articulate. She learned English very, very well, and she knows how to reach people when she speaks. And I think what I like so much about her is that she really highlights the way communism has a dirty, rotten, filthy way of creeping into people's lives. She's a professional. She said once, I thought it was so funny how she said her parents used to tell her when she was a little girl not even to think bad thoughts about the president because the government could read her mind or something like that. You know, the parents they go above and beyond to try to teach their children not to make any mistakes and speak out. You know,
well, and we may be, if not at the stage right now, very, very close to the government being able to read our minds. Right,
with all this AI, with the
and
AI,
look how America wants to be part of it under the communist Biden regime, particularly like digital money, where they can have control over your bank account, and if they say you owe taxes, they just take it right out. They don't give you a chance to fight it, or if they if they don't like you, they bankrupt you.
Yeah, they put you on a social scoring system, and if you're not a good little boy and girl, they turn your money on or off.
Yep. Well, that's what we're fighting, Rob. That's what we're here for. Yep. We're here to educate.
Every single day.
We're here to educate all those people that are listening and all the ones who they can talk to and reach out to. That this all is going to get decided in the next presidential and national election, and it is a time to wipe out the Democrat Party, which is there's no reason to have a Democrat Party anyway. It's a party of slavery. I mean, there should be a second party, and it should be made up of Democrats and other people. But why do Democrats, who are so sensitive about names like Washington and Jefferson and all these people, why are they holding on to a name that has more to do with slavery than any other? If Jefferson's statue's got to get taken down, Jefferson was a small player in slavery. And he also did play on the other side by writing criticisms of slavery that at least gave support to the intellectual movement against slavery. I describe it as, putting poison pills into our documents. So it's a mixed history. There's no mixed history of the Democrat Party. They supported slavery. They were the party of slavery. they supported the secession from the United States government and helped to cause this civil war. It was the Republican Party that supported the Union. And in fact, the Republican Party was formed in part to preserve the Union and was made up of the abolitionists of its day. So it's a much prouder history than that decrepit party of slavery, then the party of Jim Crow, then the party of the Ku Klux Klan, then the party infiltrated by communism, and now the party of the most crooked president in the history of the country.
Well, Mayor, we're entering soccer time now. Do you have any other things to say to your viewers tonight or your listeners?
Well, I would tell them that they've got to keep a close watch now on what's going to happen as a result of this deal that Hunter Biden made. By that I mean, is this an end of all of the Hunter Biden cases, of which 80% weren't even investigated? They're sitting there in the hard drive, and the FBI has done a damn thing about them, not even interviewed witnesses who feared for their lives. Let them just hang out there. Are they going to investigate that? Because we found out from Weiss, who's got to be a real disappointment to Donald Trump, who appointed him. We found out from Weiss that he didn't use the hard drive for his investigation, which means all those things involving Bobulinski, the $31.5 million from China, even the original bribes, the original $8 million from Zlochevsky and Ukraine, not to mention the $10 million that has been discovered, hasn't been investigated. The offshore bank accounts that can be supplied by a witness and witnesses that want to come forward haven't been investigated. Now it turns out that a bank in Malta was given to the Bidens. That hasn't been investigated. So there's, I mean, if you just want to quantify, there's about $50 million in bribes that still haven't been investigated. And here's the worst part of it. The majority of that involves the national security of the United States. These are not bribes from friendly countries. These are bribes from countries that want to destroy us. Now, that's really serious. And we have a president who makes irrational decisions that are against the United States' interests and in the interests of Red China. Again, I'll give you the simplest one because I like people to be able to get it. Just get it. Because we got to break up the brainwashing that you've been, because you won't hear this anywhere else. So we got to find something to shock you with. We had an airbase when Biden came into office, 400 miles from China. It was one that had just been remodeled. It was considered one of our best in the world, called Bagram. 400 miles from China. In a war of missiles, distance is crucial. I want you to think about Israel with the Iron Dome and how difficult it is for them to defend themselves, because Palestine is New Jersey. It's right across the Hudson River. And, yeah, so I was there 12 miles away from Palestine at a Iron Dome base, and the woman commander, captain in the Israeli army, basically her part of the decision making, she makes the last decision on whether to shoot down the missile or not. And they got about 6 minutes in which to act. Now, with that, with the all those problems and now they're, when I was there was just a few years ago, but they're into a third generation now of missiles, which are much better. They were 98% successful because the Israelis have such a great military. I mean, that's astounding that they could be that successful at such short. Believe me, the Chinese would not be that effective. Don't get too excited about the Chinese army. All right. China's never had a great army. Most Chinese, way deep down in their genes, are scared like hell that Japan will rearm. You want to really frighten China? Have a couple of Japanese military parades and shove them into China. Over 1,000 years, Japan, small little island, but unbelievable fighters. I wouldn't say the same thing about the Japanese army or the Japanese Navy. You remember the Japanese Navy, right? They came this close to destroying our Navy. So it's really, really important that you pay attention to these facts. No American president that loves this country, that cares about this country, would have given away that airbase 400 miles from China for no reason other than to help China. We didn't get any money for it. We didn't get any concessions for it. In fact, we also left in that base 85, yes, you got it right, $85 billion worth of arms that are now being used by 4 different terrorist groups to kill Afghans and others who helped us when we were there and helped save the lives of our soldiers and killed some of the remaining Americans. Basically, this has been funded by Joe Biden. The way Obama funded Iran during his administration when he sent cash over, remember, in the middle of the night, which he never told us how to get discovered. Who knows how much cash he sent over to them on airplanes in the middle of the night. And what does Iran use half its money for? To support terrorist groups that kill Israelis, Americans, and others of our allies. So what's this guy doing? Giving China a tremendous strategic advantage. And it just so happens he also got $31 million from them. Am I supposed to say I'm just going to believe there's no connection between the two? Why? Because I'm a stupid, naive idiot? I'm going to believe that he doesn't press COVID because he really thinks he's a nice guy. He doesn't do much of anything about fentanyl because it's really not that dangerous. I mean, we could list, we could do, when I did bribery cases, I always did a chart because you kind of know this from our recent history. Quid pro quo, quid pro quo. Remember when they kept accusing Trump of quid pro quo with the president of Ukraine? Well, that's really the definition of bribery, quid pro quo. This for that. It's Latin, 3 Latin words, quid pro quo. This for that. So this is the definition going back to the Dark Ages. Giving, offering, to give or to take away something of value. That's one side. Second side. In exchange for official action. So I go to you as the head of the liquor department of the state. And I say, it's going to take 2 years for me to get the license. I'm going to give you a new Tesla and a lifetime supply of electricity if you get me the license. So the thing of value is the Tesla and the lifetime supply of electricity. The government action is you as a government official now expedite my license. That's a classic bribe, right? You got that, right? So here's what Biden did. And it's on tape. Biden said to the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, you're not going to get your $1 billion loan guarantee if you don't fire the prosecutor who has the Burisma case. What's the thing of value or the withholding of the thing of value? The $1 billion loan guarantee. What's the official action? Dismissing the prosecutor of the Burisma case. We just completed the crime of bribery. He admitted it on tape. And the phonies of the Atlanta Council, all of whom, went to Ivy League schools, but are nitwits, applauded his admitting a bribe in front of them. Many of them lawyers who obviously forgot their criminal law course because they're posturers. They're not really lawyers. I mean, they laughed and clapped. Then they accused Trump of that. And here's what was missing from the Trump situation. Trump never offered or did not offer military aid during his conversation with Zelensky. In fact, that issue didn't come up for 2 weeks later. He just asked Zelensky to please look into the crimes, the serious crimes committed by the Bidens in Ukraine. He didn't say, if you don't do it, I will take away X, or if you do it, I'll give you Y. The man who was censored today presented a complete scenario that included that shifty shiv, and it turns out to be a complete lie, which is why he never produced a whistleblower. To this day, he hasn't produced a whistleblower. That's the second time that Schiff got away with false charges. First one is when he said he had evidence of Trump's direct involvement with the Russians, which now has been disproven by 4 different investigations. And the lying piece of crap hasn't come forward with that evidence, nor has he come forward with the whistleblower. So, I mean, the Biden bribery case has been there for 4 years. Why people get all excited about there's an FBI document that says he got a $10 million bribe. I mean, I put that evidence out, not necessarily the 10 million, but even more in bribes like 3 years ago. But the cover up buries it. They bury it. I do not have a complete explanation for why the press and the media is so corrupt. I really don't. I do not understand why they hate this country so much as to let these things happen to us. This is not just crimes of greed and the selling out of public office, which is bad enough for greed. A lot of this has to do with our safety and security against a implacable homicidal enemy. I do not understand how they can live with themselves and not want to get to the bottom of it and call themselves Americans. They sure as hell don't care about you, your life, your children's life, or our future. Somebody maybe can call me tomorrow and explain it to me. I'd really be interested in knowing the answer to that. And I'm not smart enough to or understand human conduct well enough to figure it out. I work on it. I think if I can figure it out, maybe I can do a better job of stopping it. Well, Ted, we got anything else we want to cover before we?
Well, that's the fastest hour on the internet, as we like to call it, is up. We're well into soccer time. We'll want to release more details about this Friday in the great state of Michigan. We'll give out further information for those in the Metro Detroit area. We'll have a live show.
Isn't that
great
great?
Location.
I'm so excited
Friday
about that.
night, an old classic restaurant. We'll release more information on that tomorrow. And of course, this weekend we'll be in Michigan for President Trump's speech. He's speaking at the Oakland County Republican Party dinner Sunday night in Metro Detroit, suburban Detroit. Of course, Michigan, the state in 2016 that the president won by just 10,000 votes. Mayor Giuliani was there for that whole the end of that campaign, the last stop, Grand Rapids, well past midnight into Election Day. I'm sure you remember that.
Well,
You'll remember that very well.
Yep.
So we'll be there this weekend. Of course, now we haven't talked about this yet, Mayor, but on Twitter, they're now calling them super followers. So
that's what we need, super followers.
So
we want to have we
will
want
no
to
longer
have an army.
subscribing.
We want to have an army of super followers.
So super followers.
So that we can be assured that we have so many followers that the information they're trying to keep from you, like for example, the information that was in the Epic Times about how GoFundMe lets you raise money to mutilate children. You're not gonna. I do not believe that'll be in any other newspaper. Might be in the New York Post. Might be. It could be on Newsmax. I'm not even sure it'd be on Fox anymore. I mean, I don't even know what has become of Fox, but you're sure not going to hear it many places. We're one of the few places you're going to hear this. People have to know this because this has to be stopped. This whole idea of children being allowed to mutilate their bodies before they're at an age of consent is child abuse.
Well, Mayor, our own state, actually, there was a article in the New York Post, as you said, they probably report on this. They provide $500,000 to Mount Sinai Hospital and other hospitals for transgender medical care pilot programs as critics cry moral irresponsible.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. And Adams is proposing more.
Yes.
Adams, I guess when God talked to him, he didn't mention to him that mutilation has always been a sin in the Judeo-Christian tradition. In fact, it's a very serious sin in the Jewish tradition.
Right. So essentially, our New York listeners, your tax dollars are going to transgender surgeries and things like this without your say. The liberal Governor Hochul,
or possibly without the say of the child's parents.
Correct. So the liberal Governor Hochul, one of the worst governors ever of New York State, is actually using our tax dollars for this nonsense.
Well, she's just hanging around for her paydays.
That is true.
On the stadium and a couple of other crooked deals that she's involved in. So, again, go to rudygiulianics.com where you can get our podcast. Hit subscribe.
Super follow. You got to be a super follower.
And then go on Twitter and become a super follower. And you'll get lots of additional footage that we're now producing that you'll get to see and we'll be able to discuss and develop strategies. And for example, I want to work out with you a strategy for a much better system of voter integrity and focus it on the places where it really is needed, which we're working on. We could use your advice about that. So go to Twitter, become a super follower, and you'll also help us grow, which we need in order to reach people. We need resources so that we can constantly keep growing and reach more and more and more and more people. So we're not in a position of being censored ever again. Thank you. God bless you. Remember, go to Twitter, super follower. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate to be Americans. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it.